Hello and welcome to Wednesday Warfare, where I review NXT and AEW Dynamite back-to-back and try and figure out which show won for the week. Scary times right now in the world of WWE, because it was just reported today, Wednesday, that several Performance Center peoples, including some in-ring talent, have tested positive for COVID-19. This is where it gets really scary, because up until last week or so, they weren't doing proper testing. They were just doing temperature checks. And right now, it appears that there's a potential for a full-blown outbreak in WWE. And that's really, really scary for just all of wrestling right now. The fact that cases are going up so much in Florida right now, it makes me wonder if we're even going to have wrestling to watch from WWE or AEW in the next couple of weeks. Things are getting really scary there right now, and I hope everything turns out okay. I know on AEW's side, you got Moxley, who had to stay home because he's been in contact with his wife, Renee Young, who announced today she has COVID. And then QT Marshall was apparently in contact with somebody with COVID, so he was taken off this week as well. Like I said, real crazy times right now. The best that we can hope for is that everyone who's like on the bubble or who's quarantining right now is okay, and that the people who have had COVID and have been in the ring in the Performance Center like haven't spread to other people. That seems like a real reach to hope for that, but time will tell, and we'll just have to see what the next couple of weeks look like in terms of testing and who will be allowed to participate in the shows anymore. Really wild times, but until then, folks, like what you like, don't be a dick, wear your mask. NXT begins with a clip from earlier in the night where Cameron Grimes seemingly jumped Damien Priest by his car outside the arena. Grimes shows up to the ring and says that Priest is faking his injuries because he's afraid of losing to Cameron Grimes. He wants to win by forfeit, but Priest shows up. He's heavily bandaged and taped up. He wants to fight, and so the match begins. Grimes is working the midsection a lot, but Priest is still a very strong boy. But ultimately, Cameron hits a cave-in on the outside. Priest barely avoids getting counted out, but then he eats another cave-in right away, so Cameron ends up winning. That's a finish I think we've seen a bit too much right now, especially in NXT, where it's a person who just narrowly avoids the count out and gets beat right afterward. I've seen that at least 3 or 4 times now. Probably it's like once a month, I think, is the average right now. Anyway, Cameron wins. A big upset for him, even though Priest is working with this kayfabe injury and whatnot. I'm just wondering, in the absence of a crowd, what exactly makes Damien Priest likable or facey at the moment? Like, he put up the valiant effort against Finn Balor TakeOver, got that, acted somewhat face-like in promos in the weeks that followed, but I don't know. It's like, apparently Drew McIntyre is the only person that the company is allowed to book very strongly all the time. And Damien might get to that point, but I mean, right now it's not easy. He's kind of in this perpetual suffering mode at the moment. So hopefully things will turn around for him in the future. Outside, Rhea Ripley is asked by the interviewer about Io Shirai when Robert Stone shows up and says, when you threw me in the trash 2 weeks ago, you hurt my body and you hurt my heart, but he's willing to forgive and give Rhea a golden ticket and a second chance to join the Robert Stone brand. Rhea just picks him up, dumps him into a dumpster, and seeing him flailing around like a turtle on his shell was one of the funniest things of the night. Aaliyah shows up and slaps Rhea in the face, and so Rhea just kind of shrugs it off and challenges her to a match for later in the night. Time for another installment of Thatch as Thatch Can Wrestling. Very similar format to what we saw last week, where Timothy Thatcher, he very calmly explains to his trainees like why these holds are so painful, as he's got people in the hold and they're just like writhing and thrashing about in agony and tapping and everything. And with this one, we can really see some tight shots of Thatcher getting some kind of sick pleasure, this evil smirk on his face as he's applying the holds to these poor schlubs. My favorite part of this is at the end where he dismisses the trainees. The important thing is at the end, we all had fun. I think Thatcher is been really good so far with kind of the deadpan delivery. Like when his stuff with Matt Riddle a few weeks ago when they were tag team champions, and Thatcher being the straight man to Riddle's antics was pretty hilarious. And seeing a little bit of glimpse of that in Thatch as Thatch Can, I'm also really enjoying that. I don't want Thatcher to be like this ironic deadpan wrestler all the time, but when he does it in these rare instances, I think it's phenomenal. Santos Escobar takes on Jake Atlas in a non-title match. Atlas, by the way, looking for a bit of revenge after Santos destroyed Drake Maverick last week on NXT. Some good back and forth in this matchup here. A little bit of involvement from the cronies on the outside, Joaquin Wilde and Raul Mendoza, but not too much. Santos wins basically clean as a whistle with the Phantom Driver afterward. I gotta admit, the longer it's been going on, the more I'm into this version of Santos. I was skeptical at first when he first unmasked, but now, he's got a good look, he's got the cronies, he's got the belt. I'm liking this kind of early version of this group, and I'm looking forward to seeing where it goes in the future. Some more Undisputed Therapy, and they say it takes place earlier in the day, but this is clearly shot the same time they shot last week's Undisputed Therapy. We see Roderick Strong have a bit of a breakthrough here. He wants to confront his fear of the trunk. He turns around and finally realizes his therapist this whole time has been a cleverly disguised Kyle O'Reilly. So they go out to the car, and Roderick, of course, last week he ran away from the trunk. This week he embraces it. He goes in the trunk, they close it on him, and they open it up, and he's faced his fear. They're all happy as can be. The shot of Adam grabbing the trunk and counting down before it with this big smile on his face was great. So anyway, Roderick conquers his fear. He pops out. Everyone's happy. And then Roderick finds out he's wrestling Dexter Lumis later in the night. And so the look in his face immediately changes, very perturbed. We see Malcolm Bivens and Indus Sher backstage, and Malcolm says that he is pissed off to the highest level of pistivity. Put that on a t-shirt. He basically says, last week that he and his tag team had the purest of intentions when they walked out to look at the tag title match, and then Lorcan and Birch just had to get involved, and so then Indus Sher has some strong words for Lorcan and Birch in their native tongue, and that's the promo. We get a hype package for the triple threat main event later in the night, and then we see Kacy Catanzaro and Caden Carter taking on Raquel Gonzales and Dakota Kai, very similar to last week, except now it's a tag team match playa. Raquel, as she's making her way out, as she and Dakota make their entrance, Morrow on commentary says that Raquel has dubbed herself Big Mommy Cool, really taking the whole Diesel designation a bit too literally here. Be that as it may, Raquel is the story in this matchup. Her power and her strength are on full display here for all to see against her smaller opponents. The best part of this match is where she does a one-arm powerbomb to Kacy right after she gives a big boot to Caden Carter in the ring. That was amazing. And then Dakota comes in and makes Kacy tap out for them to win the match. And then afterward, Dakota talks into the camera toward Io Shirai. The champ is in her crosshairs. Last week, Bronson Reed said he wants another shot at Karrion Kross, and he's getting it here in this rematch. Kross looks very good here. It's probably, second only to the match with Ciampa at TakeOver. This is the most competitive match that Karrion's had since being on TV. Still not saying much, because even though, Breed, he tosses him around for a bit, Kross just stops selling things after a while. He doesn't sell the German, and the other big hits. He finally takes him out with a Doomsday Saito and a Kross Jacket to win once again. So he was a bit on the ropes there, but he still overpowers the thick boy to win here. I mean, Karrion's looking great right now. Adam Cole interviewed backstage who's his pick to win the triple threat tonight. Adam says he has no preference, but now he just wants to make sure he can make some space on his mantle for another championship. And then we get another hype package foretelling the arrival of Mercedes Martinez, who says that NXT has opened a Pandora's box. Rhea Ripley taking on Aaliyah, who's accompanied by Robert Stone. Poor Aaliyah didn't have a chance in this match. She was getting tossed hither and yon the entire time by Rhea. Near the end, Robert throws a shoe from the apron, but that proves to be his undoing. And then Rhea hits the riptide on Aaliyah to win the matchup. And then later on, we see backstage, Robert and Aaliyah are on a Zoom chat or Skype or whatever with William Regal. And Robert says, "We need this rematch with Rhea Ripley." And just like Daffy Duck, he succumbs to pronoun trouble because Regal takes that literally and says, "Next week you'll have a handicap match, the two of you against Ripley." But then Stone says, when we win, Rhea Ripley has to join the Robert Stone brand. And then Rhea jumps in and says, I'm all for that. So the match is on. Oh man, I really want to see kind of a troll job here and have Rhea lose by screwish circumstances and be forced to be part of the Robert Stone brand for a month or so before she finally snaps. I'm not saying it's going to be amazing television, but I just kind of want to see what they would do with that. Also, for all the fact that Robert Stone fell into this whole downward spiral after Chelsea Green left him, where's Chelsea Green been since she fired him? We get an announcement for a fatal four-way match for next week to determine the #1 contender for the Women's Championship. It's going to be Tegan Nox, Mia Yim, Dakota Kai, and Candice LeRae. And then we also get an announcement that next week's NXT is going to be Great American Bash themed. So with absolutely no build or no hype and no real big matches announced for the show for next week, they're just going to slap on the Great American Bash branding to compete with the first week of Fyter Fest. Wow, show us how much you care about that brand, guys. Main event time, North American Championship triple threat as Keith Lee defends against Finn Balor and Johnny Gargano. Lee withstands a lot of punishment early on, and before the break, he's finally taken out for a bit, which allows Gargano and Balor to finally put some work in here. We get a repeat of that shot of, like, we see a shot of Finn Balor in the corner, and then Keith Lee stands up and rises into the shot, and it's a great looking visual, but I feel we've seen that a few times already. And so in the end, we've got Finn almost hitting Johnny with the 1960 on the outside, but Lee pounces them both when he's mid-move. He also powerbombs Gargano onto Finn, who is like sitting prone on the top turnbuckle. Lee hits the Big Bang Catastrophe on Gargano. Finn hits the double stomp from the top, the coup de grace to break up the pinfall, but then he eats the Big Bang Catastrophe for Keith Lee to win. He retains the championship, and he'll face Adam Cole in 2 weeks for a winner-take-all match. And I don't know, if I were a betting man, I would just go out and say right now, I think Keith Lee's going to win it all. I think that Cole has done pretty much all he can as champion right now with his record-setting reign. And honestly, I don't think that Keith Lee winning the North American Championship a few months ago, I don't think that was the end of his push. I think there's more upward trajectory here, and so I would not be surprised if Lee's the one who walks out in 2 weeks with both belts. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments. Dynamite begins with a lumberjack match, and of the wrestlers surrounding the ring, the best friends are definitely dressed for the part as Wardlow takes on Luchasaurus. It's two highly athletic big men doing highly athletic big man things. I love it. At one point, they're both on the top turnbuckle getting ready for a spot, and JR goes, "The large lizard man has evil intentions." And at one point, Wardlow hits like a standing Hurricane Rana, for God's sake. Someone of a man that size shouldn't be able to look as effortless as he did. They fight their way up to the stage, and then like Brandon Cutler gets involved, and so then like Wardlow hucks Cutler off the stage, and also Marco Stunt as well, which looks very impressive, onto all the other waiting lumberjacks below. Luchasaurus kicks Wardlow off the stage. There's a standing shooting star onto everybody. Back into the ring they go. MJF gets on the apron, and Jungle Boy from one side of the ring to the other tackles MJF out of the ring. In the distraction, Wardlow hits a low blow and hits the F10 on Luchasaurus to win the match. Then afterward, the Jurassic Express and MJF and Wardlow start fighting. Everyone gets involved here, but I think it was a very fun opening match. I mean, lumberjack matches can either be like completely inconsequential and the lumberjacks do nothing, or, you know, in the case of a match like this, you've got some really fun action. It's not the greatest lumberjack match I've ever seen. I think that belongs to, I think it was Dean Ambrose and Seth Rollins at Battleground, I want to say 2016. I could be off on that year. But like I said, really fun opening match, and we find out that MJF and Wardlow will face Jungle Boy and Luchasaurus at Fyter Fest. Hikaru Shida in non-title action against a woman named Red Velvet, which I thought was a pretty cool name for a lady wrestler. Before the match begins, though, Shida gets into it at ringside with Penelope Ford, who's challenging her for the title at Fyter Fest. Ford decks Shida, and Shida wants to fight back, but he gets pulled apart before anything happens. The match begins, the match ends in like 12 seconds. Shida destroys Red Velvet, then she goes right back to the outside of the ring, and they have a big brawl. And in the fracas, Kip Sabian, poor Kip, he loses one of the lenses of his sunglasses. It was a short and sweet segment, but I liked how it came across. You know, it reminds us of the feud these two have been having the last few weeks, and Shida's taking no one's shitta, and so yeah, that was good stuff overall. We go to a scene from earlier in the day. There's a TNT Championship press conference between Cody and Jake Hager, who's not there at the beginning of the press conference. Cody, meanwhile, has his entourage, which seems to be getting Tyson-esque in size, just growing every single week, it feels like. They take some softball questions from Matt Brock and Liz Hunter of PWI. Man, those are some deep cuts. Arn talks for a little bit, and then Cody talks about how winning the championship is like hope. He calls himself the American Nightmare, but he still believes in the American Dream, and that is hope. He doesn't like meta or cosplay wrestling, as he puts it. He starts to put over the title. Then all of a sudden, Hager and his wife, Mrs. Hager, show up. And Hager doesn't say anything, but they do the photo op with the belt and everything. Hager puts a bit of extra mustard on it, putting the fist right up against Cody's jaw. And then Mrs. Hager throws a glass of water in Cody's face. And the Hagers run off and everything. And Dustin's very mad for what happened to his brother. And that's where it ends. You know, I thought it was okay. Like, it seems, you know, kind of funny that Cody's the one who gets to play with all the new toys. He gets to have like all the cool, unique segments that nobody else does. We get the continuing adventures of Sonny Kiss and Joey Janela. In this scene, the two are filling up their car, getting some gas, and while Janela's in the convenience store, Sonny is confronted by some ruffians. He's able to hold his own, and then Janela comes in and helps finish the fight off. You know, I will say, I've not seen their work as a tag team on Dark, and I know that's kind of where they've been primarily before these vignettes shown, but what I've been seeing in the vignettes, I'm really loving this dynamic between Janela and Kiss. We then go to our next match as the two of them take on the unlikely pairing of Brody Lee and Colt Cabana, and this lower third for Colt reads like a strong bad line.
Will associating with the Dark Order help him win the big ones?
Yes, Colt is on a trial membership basis with the Dark Order here, kind of a reluctant partner, but Mr. Brody Lee wants to show Colt all the joys and the benefits of what being a member of the Dark Order will get him. This is a great tag team match, by the way, here. These four, I think, really work well together, and, this is, probably the biggest match for Kiss and Janela at this point. Even in defeat, they still look really strong here. They're fighting against all sides and everything. It ends when Brody hits Janela with his discus elbow, and then literally just kind of hands it off to Colt for him to make the pinfall and win the match. So Colt's back on the upswing. He's won a match again, and the music plays and all that. He's very happy. And then after the match, we see the Murder Hawk, Lance Archer, destroy Sonny Kiss and Joey Janela until finally Jake Roberts tells him to chill out. We find out that Janela and Archer will face off at Fyter Fest later on. But like I said, this tag team match was good. It was the first of many good tag matches on this night. And like I said, did a really good job putting over Kiss and Janela as this kind of like really dynamic, charismatic tag team. Even in defeat, I think they still looked great. Up next, SCU versus FTR. Together, they are scruffed. I love when FTR drive their truck to the arena. Justin Roberts announces them as literally driving in from Asheville, North Carolina. Early in the match before the commercial break, you got Harwood and Kaz doing the suplex over the ropes to the outside spot, and Kaz with the piece de resistance, spiking himself with the DDT on the way down on the floor before we go to commercial break. Another banger of a tag team match here, but with these four guys, what do you expect? It ends when FTR hit the Goodnight Express on Chris Daniels to win. Then afterward, Harwood on the mic, and he basically calls out all the other tag teams. Suddenly, you hear some either engine revving up in their truck. The Butcher and the Blade have commandeered their pickup, and as they're distracted with that, we see the Lucha Brothers make their return. They're back in the ring, and they confront FTR. The Blade on the microphone challenges FTR and the Young Bucks to an 8-man tag at Fyter Fest. FTR accept, and then they get beat up by the Lucha Brothers, the package pile driver, and all that stuff, the stomp combo and whatnot. And the Young Bucks show up to make the save, and that's where it ends. That 8-man tag should be pretty darn wild. We get some hype packages for the tag title and the world title matches happening at Fyter Fest, and then Brian Cage destroys poor Joe Cruz. They say on commentary that Moxley was supposed to be fighting Cruz here, but as I mentioned earlier, he was taken off TV because he came into contact with COVID, and so, scary. Get better, Renee, and stay safe, Moxley. Taz joins commentary for this match. He's not there for very long. It's a pretty short match, but the one main thought he gets out is, no doubt about it, Cole, Britt Baker likes me and Brian Cage so much, she's giving us free dental care. How cool is that, Cole? And Jared just goes, that's riveting. Cage throws the poor guy around, hits the drill claw to win, and then after the match, Taz gets on the microphone and looks right into the camera lens to talk to Jon Moxley, who he says is sitting at home on his ass with a bullshit excuse, and he talks about how Cage is going to be Moxley's undoing at Fyter Fest. I mean, God willing, that match actually happens. Backstage, Brody Lee and Colt Cabana having a nice chat in a small dark blue room. Brody challenging SCU to a 6-man tag match at Fyter Fest alongside Colt and Stu Grayson. Meanwhile, we go back to Britt Baker, who's still been passing notes to Tony Schiavone on the little pulley system all night, and the last note that Tony reads it's directed toward Big Swole, and he opens up by saying, even though I was stuck in a dumpster for 9.5 to 10 hours. I love the fact that every time Britt mentions the dumpster, the length of time she's been in the dumpster just goes up drastically every mention with it. It's amazing. So then Tony, speaking for Britt, wraps up the promo. Big Swole shows up, but they're separated by the plexiglass surrounding the Rolls-Royce, the role model's Royce. Swole gets on top of the vehicle while Britt's not looking and dumps an entire trash can onto Britt, and she's freaking out, and then Rebel has like a leaf blower trying to shoo Swole away, and that the whole visual of Britt just screaming covered in trash, Swole's just jaw-jacking with her, and Rebel's there at the bottom with a leaf blower. What a shot. That was wonderful. Matt Hardy taking on Santana of the Inner Circle. It was supposed to be Sammy Guevara taking on Hardy here, but as many of you probably already know, over the weekend, some old audio resurfaced of Guevara from 4 years ago saying some very stupid comments about Sasha Banks. That audio was released by the interviewer, actually, and now Sammy is serving an indefinite suspension. And by the way, it's Broken Matt, by the way, is wrestling here because that gimmick won a Twitter poll between the other incarnations of Matt Hardy. Some good back and forth here. Ortiz gets some licks in as the match goes on, kind of make it like a handicap match. At one point, Hardy hits Santana with like 3 straight side effects, and Santana kicks out of all of them. Finally, Santana hits like a death Valley driver into a pinfall, and Hardy just kind of like counters, whoop, rolls him back up, and now Hardy wins the match. I thought it was an okay match. Ortiz jumps Hardy afterward, hits him with the balls and the pantyhose, I forget what it's called, hits him with those things and the street sweeper. Then Private Party come out to make the save, albeit a little late. In your final segment, Orange Cassidy and Chris Jericho have a face-to-face, and Jericho opens the segment by repeating the phrase, "Why did the chicken cross the road to get to the other side?" And his point being for repeating that phrase is every time you hear it, it gets a little less funny, a little more stupid, just like Orange Cassidy. Jericho says he understands why people like Orange, but at the end of the day, he stepped out of his lane when he got into the inner circle's business, and he wraps up his promo by saying that at Fyter Fest, he's going to make sure this Orange runs out of juice. Put on the shades. Yeah! Orange then grabs the mic and proceeds to gently put it down, then starts doing his shin kick gimmick to Jericho. The one thing Jericho explicitly warned him not to do in that promo, by the way. Jericho takes the sunglasses off Orange's head and breaks them with his hands. That's all that Orange can stand. He tackles Jericho, and they has big old fight here. They go to the brawl on the outside in the crowd. Jericho throws the crane camera and hits it right in Orange's face. He's bleeding from the ear as a result of that attack. Orange comes back and hits a big running Superman punch down the steps to Jericho, flies off, and goes through a table. Orange grabs some new sunglasses, puts them on, and stands tall, kind of a bloody mess there. Really kind of, it was a cool moment. I think that, if you're on the Orange Cassidy train, this has to feel very validating for you. The fact that he is, in this feud with Chris Jericho really shows what the company thinks of Orange and what Jericho thinks of Orange as well, and how they value him as a character on the program. I think, it was Orange looked great in this segment, didn't even have to say a word, and Jericho did a good job building up as well. So yeah, great final segment. Time now for me to decide which show won for the week, NXT or AEW Dynamite. And this week my choice is going to be Dynamite. I don't think I had any real problems with NXT this week. There was nothing I hated, no cons this week for NXT. I just felt, if anything, it just felt a little bit dry compared to what we saw with AEW. I think it was a much more entertaining show on the whole. I think they had some great matches and some great build for Fyter Fest. If there's one thing that I've really enjoyed about AEW in the last year or so is that their build toward pay-per-views on Dynamite, or in this case, it's like a pay-per-view on free television across 2 weeks. I think it's been really strong, like how they built toward Revolution, how they built toward Double or Nothing. I think that, again, the quality of what we see on television really increases around that time, and this is no exception. Some really fun matches that truly felt alive and different from the status quo. Just good stuff all around. But let me know what you thought about NXT and AEW this week in the comment section below. And one more reminder for you guys, for those who've been wondering where my SmackDown reviews have been, they're taking place right now on Instagram Live. Go to my Instagram handle at Brian Zane on Friday night at around between 8:30 and 9 at night Pacific time. I'm going to give my live and kind of uncut thoughts on SmackDown for the week. And then I made a mistake in how to do it the first week. The second week I figured it out. So after the live video is done, if you miss it, it is going to be archived and it's going to be on my regular Instagram feed. So if you live on the other side of the country, or the world I should say, you're not there to witness my live reviews, you can check it out later. So be sure to tune in Friday night or Saturday morning if you feel like it for my SmackDown review. I'm Brian Zane, and I'll see you next time.